Hello again everyone, it's Richard. I'm doing a video about this clinical book which I spoke about earlier. That's the one if you just about see it for me. Just there. It's by Dr. Julia Grace Patterson. She's the CEO of EveryDoctor in the UK. Now I've decided to do one video per chapter because I realised if I read the whole book and did that first and then tried to do everything in one video, it would be a week before I did anything, so I thought wasn't a good idea, so I decided to do one video per chapter, so it makes it easy for me. That means I can do more stuff more often, which is good for the channel, I guess. So okay, so I hope you can hear me. So the introduction is quite large, it's quite long, it's about 36 pages, where Julia talks about her history and how she got into this position, basically. It's quite a dry chapter, to be honest, but it's largely factual, that's why. Quite clear writing on the whole. But the chapter I want to talk about, the first one, is called the Promise. It's about how the NHS was set up and what it was all about. So sorry. It is a public service governed by three clear principles which are stated within the NHS Constitution on the UK Government's own website. These principles indicate that the NHS will provide equal care for all, based on a patient's clinical need, and provided for free at the point of delivery. Together, they represent the promise of the NHS, a promise made to every member of the public, and one that explains why the NHS has become embedded within our society. So then moving on to page 51. It's a bit more significant, I think. I'm doing highlights, basically. Over the past 40 years, government ministers have made incremental changes to the structure of the service that have opened up the NHS to privatisation and external providers in many different ways. Starting in the 1980s, they created an internal NHS marketplace that forced NHS facilities to compete with one another. They also engaged in a huge number of private finance initiative (PFI) contracts that outsourced the building and maintenance of NHS facilities to private companies, thereby burdening the NHS with enormous debt and cripplingly expensive maintenance contracts with private providers. They introduced outsourcing of NHS services, which means that thousands are now by external providers, including private companies, and parts of the service are currently being sold off to private interests, including one instance recently of a large number of GP surgeries being sold to a healthcare insurance company, which as I recall was Palantir, but I'm not sure about that. Each of these changes over the past 40 years has, for two reasons, interfered with the NHS's ability to fulfil its principles and provide equal, comprehensive care for all. First, because of the disruption of the very architecture of the system. Making these changes within the NHS structure has fragmented the system and damaged relationships between the services and, on an individual level, between staff and patients. And second, because in the pursuit of corporatisation within the service, policymakers are committed their attention to moulding the service in a new shape, instead of devoting their energy towards furthering the three principles, expanding and evolving the NHS project. So if you look at the Trust, for example, in England and Wales, I think, I'm not sure about Scotland, why they're there. The NHS is a national service, so you need to distribute data between patients quite easily around the place, and IT systems may be different, and I think they are. The interface is a bit strange and quite difficult to coordinate, I believe. Not work too well, and so why do that? And internally within a hospital, within a trust, you may have different sections which are kind of farmed out as if they're corporate bodies in their own right, and they have to again interface with each other and more staff to administer the system, which is why you get more managers in a top-heavy situation now. And in my own experience, when I had some, when I went to Wales recently and had some treatment for cancer there, I asked about the management. I was told that the managers don't listen to the staff. all they care about is the patients, which I can understand in a sense, but the staff have to be noted as well, because they have their own concerns, and if they're not listened to, then the patients suffer. It's a really stupid philosophy, daft. But there have been times in the past 40 years when, despite all of these negative factors, the full scale of the damage caused by the politicians' decisions has been masked because of the sheer scaling investment into the NHS. During the Blair years, for example, the largest expansion of PFI projects took place. Huge hospital projects were taken on, paid for and managed by private companies, and then leased back to the NHS at great expense, which we are still paying for. Billions of pounds of public money spent every single year. But Blair's government also made record-breaking investments into the NHS that drove down waiting lists and invested enormously in the service. There are fissures forming below the surface, destabilising the integrity of the NHS structure, but these are papered over with money, lots and lots of money. Over the past decade and a bit, we have finally seen the true extent of the damage done by multiple governments over the past 40 years. And this is because, in addition to accelerating the privatisation of the service in a multitude of ways, successive governments since David Cameron's narrow 2010 election victory and subsequent coalition with the Lib Dems have starved the NHS of its funding, cut hospital bed numbers, instigated long-standing NHS staff pay freezes, cut the student nurse bursary, supported nurses through their studies, and then restarted it again after much pressure from campaigners and the public. They have failed to listen to repeated warnings from healthcare leaders, campaigners and the public about the long-term impact of their decisions, both these and others. You can't cut things back forever and expect the service to remain the same. Expect the staff to keep absorbing more and more. There's a tipping point. Over time, the situation becomes intolerable and things break. People's morale, the level of care that can be offered. The capacity of the healthcare facilities becomes overwhelmed. We currently, for example, have an unmet maintenance bill for building repairs in the NHS in England of £9 billion. So much needed repairs have been shelved, even though they have been judged to a significant safety risk for staff and patients. I remind you of the Liz Truss's hospital in the east somewhere, where she's MP, and she pointed out that the roof had been covered up by these pillars, building post things. Problems built up as we got towards the end of the 2010s. The paper applied by New Labour peeled away, revealing the deepening cracks in the service. Staff morale was dwindling fast after a decade of cutbacks and squeezes. Patient safety problems started to emerge as first as isolated incidents during the busiest time of the year, the so-called winter crises that became an annual occurrence from around 2013 onwards, and then other busy times such as long bank holiday weekends when the service struggled with escalating staff numbers. Doctors began to dread public holidays because they knew the stress they would entail, the pressure the service would be under, and the impact on our patients. Everyone became stretched beyond capacity, and understaffing became a significant problem within the service. For some time before long waiting lists and overstretched A&E departments began making the headlines, pressures began building up for staff within the service. There were increasing instances of NHS doctors being expected to do the jobs of 2 or 3. When doctors are placed in a position like this because the staff absences and are failure to find anyone else to fill the slot, it's a stressful experience. Teams of doctors are on call within each medical specialty, work in a coordinated fashion to receive information about new patients or patients requiring urgent attention within the hospital. This information is disseminated between team members, and who then assess and treat patients in a safe and organised fashion. Because of the way healthcare facilities are laid out, the team will likely be covering several clinical areas at any given time. This requires each member of the team to carry a device through which they can be contacted often a pager or sometimes a mobile phone. Information flows up the chain to the most senior doctor and down the chain to the most junior. It is a system that has been developed to ensure optimal safety for patients. If the team is missing one of those doctors, the device still needs to be carried by someone in the team because they are the point of contact that other staff members use. For example, A&E staff referring to a new patient, queries coming from new NHS facilities or in the community, nurses in hospital wards who require assistance with the patients, the hospital switchboard involving the team of battle emergency somewhere in the hospital requiring urgent immediate attention. So one of the remaining team members has to carry two devices. This places the system under immediate pressure. As the calls come in with the task requiring attention, the doctor receives that information to either make a further call, asking another team member to take action, or add the task to their own list. But any doctor doing the job of several people can quickly become swamped, with calls coming in faster than the task can be allocated or completed. Things quickly become fraught and the situation can be extremely stressful. In situations like this, doctors run on adrenaline. There's barely time to eat or drink or even go to the loo. Such a state of affairs was once rare and notable, but over time, occurrences like these became more and more common. If one team found itself in this position, the likelihood was other teams in the hospital facing something similar. The result has been stressed out, overstretched doctors calling other stressed out, overstretched doctors within the same hospital to refer a patient, share information, or attempt to solve a problem which is in a system where the pressure never lets up. I've been in this situation many times. At the end of a day like this, you feel exhausted, wrung out, hollow, and you are full of anxiety about whether you missed anything, rushed anything, failed to complete important tasks that could impact on someone's health. I'm just checking my notes. We lost a huge number of experienced NHS clinicians during these years towards the end of the 2010s. They chose to move abroad, or exchange careers, or retire early because of the pressures and stress they had to shoulder within an under-resourced system. I remember writing information for EveryDoctor's website when we were planning our launch at the end of 2018. Even then, we were describing the pressures upon staff, the exodus of experienced professionals, the stress this was loading upon the remaining doctors, and the impact it was having on patients. The winter crises that receive brief, intense media attention each year should have served as a canary in the mine, attracting the attention of the government and protecting the provision of resources to prevent the situation from continuing and worsening. The staffing problems would necessitate a response, particularly when areas of new low morale and an exodus of staff became apparent. The chief executive of the British Red Cross, after all, described the situation facing the NHS as a humanitarian crisis back in January 2017. There were deep-seated problems even then. And yet this didn't happen. There was no moment of reflection from the government, no re-evaluation of the plan for NHS budgeting, or meaningful provision of staff support. And so the NHS came to the COVID-19 pandemic ill-equipped for the greatest public health challenge since its inception. The depleted, exhausted workforce and over 4 million patients on NHS waiting list in England alone. In order to create capacity to prepare for patients who are extremely unwell with COVID-19, a lot of their planned elective procedures for non-emergency operations, for example, and outpatient deployments, were delayed or cancelled, sometimes multiple times. Many staff were relocated from their usual workplaces to look after COVID-19 patients, often working beyond their professional experience, forced to step up at the time of crisis. This was necessary at the start of the pandemic, and despite the enormous pressure upon themselves, often involving a change in their working arrangements, or even their living arrangements. I didn't hear a single doctor complain about this. The stoicism was remarkable. I was running EveryDoctor full-time by this point, and spent much of my time corresponding with the doctors within our network. I was in regular contact with one of our members who was a surgeon, and who had decided to live away from his heavily pregnant wife because he felt compelled to be available as possible to the patients in his hospital. There are many sacrifices like this with among NHS staff members, and many instances of extraordinary stress absorbed by staff members. The staff desperately required support to help them in the pressures they were experiencing, but any support given by the government seemed to be offered reluctantly or not at all. The government eventually brought 40 mental health hubs in place for staff in England, but it is only after enormous campaigning efforts have made clear the dire need for these. Those efforts shouldn't have been necessary. The impact the pandemic had and continues to have on the staff was obvious. When vaccines became available, GPs in England were asked to set up many of the first vaccine centres at extremely short notice, and many doctors within our network pulled this off, working around the clock to ensure the safe setup of these important facilities. Frontline healthcare staff weren't prioritised for first dose vaccines, again, not until enormous campaigning efforts pushed the government into action. Staff were continually required to step up and endure more sacrifice and hardship, and for many this was extremely difficult. I don't think there's been a proper reckoning of the experiences staff went through at incredibly demanding time. No, I guess not. Then later. And when eventually the major waves of the pandemic tailed off, the NHS was in a terrible state. We had endured the pandemic. There were 4 million patients waiting for treatment. At the time of writing, there were 7.2 million patients on waiting list in England. The numbers didn't suddenly spike from 4 to 7 million. It went up month after month, and as the numbers have increased, they've been accompanied by lengthening waiting times in A&E and for ambulances. The government was repeatedly warned about the deteriorating situation by campaigning organisations, trade unions, charities and royal colleges. For our part, EveryDoctor had the date set into our calendar of when every month the NHS statistics in England would be announced. And every month we would discuss what was happening with the network of people we spoke to online. We would do our best to communicate the risks, to highlight the severity of the problems, to provide a platform concerning the frontline NHS doctors and the patient's safety problems that were occurring, month after month after month. Warning about the public about what was happening, warning about what would happen next. Organisations that traditionally had stayed pretty apolitical, medical organisations leaders had told me when we launched EveryDoctor they were not risk being too strong in their messaging about the government's actions, started being extremely explicit and critical in their public statements. They had no choice. It's become ever more evident since the summer 2021 what was going to happen to the NHS. The situation is moving in one direction, towards full-blown collapse. And that, as I stated in the introduction, has now happened. As I write this in early 2023, the pressure at all levels of health services is so enormous that the system is no longer holding together. Patients who need healthcare urgently in emergencies are often receiving no care at all. Many are dying while they wait. The pressures that stem from community services like GP practices all the way through the system. GPs usually assess people with new symptoms, treat acute illnesses, manage people's chronic diseases, and refer patients for specialist treatment where required. But because the burden of illness is so great within communities now, GP's time has become increasingly taken with patients who are deteriorating whilst waiting specialist input. They're providing urgent care and managing complex clinical decision making for an increasingly sick group of patients, and meanwhile other people are unable to access the GP for routine appointments and checkups. The pressure upon GPs at the moment is unbelievable and mounting. For patients who are unwell enough to need A&E treatment, ambulance waits are terrifyingly long. Every second counts when a patient is experiencing a clinical emergency. Ambulances attending life-threatening emergencies are taking far longer than recommended wait time to arrive. For patients with a stroke, severe burns or chest pain, at the time of writing, the latest stats are an average wait of 93 minutes for an ambulance in England. Through the network of doctors that EveryDoctor speaks to every day, we're hearing about patients who telephone for an ambulance that simply never arrives. Disturbing stories of patients eventually turning up at a GP practice after many hours or even days later, having had a severe fall or breathlessness or chest pain. People are trying to access healthcare and when they call, no one comes. For the patients who do reach A&E, the situation there are no better. In some cases, they're worse. Elderly patients wait for 24 or 36 hours on seats in emergency waiting rooms because there's no clinical area in which to treat them. Patients cared for in cupboards. Juggling plugs between patients requiring intravenous pump medications because there aren't enough to go around. Hospital beds are being removed from the allocated spaces in the major areas like A&E departments to make way for 6 people sitting on chairs in each cubicle instead. One NHS consultant told me recently about a situation when an elderly person with a diagnosed stroke had to sit for more than 24 hours in a waiting room chair. And this wasn't an isolated incident. The consultant described that the overcrowding was regularly forcing patients into situations like this. I've heard similar things from doctors all over the UK who are horrified by the conditions their patients are enjoying. So many instances of people waiting interminably uncomfortably without dignity, lacking the care they need, the care the staff are so desperately trying to provide, the care that patients deserve. And meanwhile, in the hospital ward, staff battle day after day trying to care for patients as best they can, but frequently missing patients and medication doses because of the understaffing and extraordinary pressures. Patients are discharging themselves or relatives, sometimes even babies, or treating unwell with conditions like sepsis, because they feel so aghast at conditions in the hospital and feel that they or their loved one is receiving care that is so substandard as to be pointless, and they'll be better off at home. There are places where the staffing levels are so low now that patients' families are being asked to step in and provide care for themselves in shifts. I spoke to one person recently who said her mum had been to hospital recently despite desperately unwell with a rare form of cancer. She's been cared for in intensive care and it required both chemotherapy and a non-invasive ventilation. Because of the short staffing on her mum's ward, nursing staff without accredited intensive care training have been moved from other parts of the hospital to plug staffing gaps. The lady I spoke to described that on many occasions none of the nursing staff of the ward knew how to work the non-invasive ventilation equipment properly. As a desperate measure, she had learned herself how to manage the equipment in some rudimentary fashion. Horrifyingly, on one occasion, the mum's chemotherapy treatment was even paused because none of the staff were confident about administering the drugs. The social care crisis, which has been escalating for many years and which the current government has claimed on various cases it will fix, is extraordinarily bad. Carers aren't paid enough, there are staffing problems and capacity problems, and it's causing a situation with huge numbers of patients ready to be discharged from hospital but cannot leave. In an article in The Guardian published in November 22, it was revealed that in some NHS hospitals in England, up to 1 in 3 patients are awaiting discharge in this way. And for the staff, those pressures that experienced in 2018, those bad days running on adrenaline, feeling stressed and fraught, must be looked back upon with relative fondness. Things are so much worse now. I receive information from doctors in our network who have been updating me regularly for several years about what's happening and where they are. I hear about what their experiences, their fears for their patients, about their abject horror and sorrow, and the weight of their worries is often palpable through their words. Countless doctors and health staff are now showing extraordinary courage at the moment, repeatedly going the extra mile on behalf of their patients, when the service is collapsing all around them. And aside from the minute-to-minute day-to-day experience in GP surgeries, A&E departments and hospital wards, there is the impact those experiences have on patients and relatives. These experiences won't be easily forgotten. They will stay impinged upon the memories of people who have been failed at the very time they require support, failed in their most vulnerable moments, failed because the operation was a coincidence gain, or the treatment in A&E was administered too late, failed because there wasn't a bed, or an appointment, or a plug, or because someone who knows how to turn on the machine or give out the drugs. NHS is broken now. So yeah, pretty strong stuff. Yeah, I hope that was useful for you at least, and educational and informative. And if you liked it, please give me a thumbs up on YouTube and like and whatever, and subscribe and spread the word via social media, please. And I hope there's no copyright issues. I don't think there are, because I'm not making money out of this at all. But I basically promoting the book. and the service and the EveryDoctor, so I see no harm in that. Anyway, I'll see you later, and thank you for your time and subscribing and reading, listening and viewing. Thank you. Bye.